Also at that event was the Utah freshman Republican, Senator Mike Lee. Senator Lee joins us now from Capitol Hill. Senator, just help us understand this moment. I know that you campaigned saying this is what you wanted to go to Washington to do, to control spending. And I certainly respect your campaign promises. Now you're faced with this situation where you know you can't get everything you want. The Democrats control the Senate where you serve. You have a Democratic president. Where's the give?
Well, first of all, I want to make clear that it's not just some Republicans who have problems with this. Politico just reported that all 53 Democrats in the Senate intend to oppose this plan, and I've also heard rumors to the effect that every Democrat in the House intends to oppose it. So I'm not alone in that regard. Nor is it all that extraordinary for us to suggest that we ought to move this forward in such a way that it doesn't have to become a political hot potato every time it's time to raise the debt limit. If we put a balanced budget amendment in place, this would help permanently solve the problem. So it wouldn't have to be news anymore when we balance the budget. It wouldn't have to be political drama every time we have to address a spending problem.
But Speaker Boehner's plan would ultimately bring a balanced budget amendment to the floor in the House. I believe it's in October. Leader Reid's plan in the Senate doesn't have a balanced budget amendment. The Democratic leadership doesn't want it. The president doesn't want it. Senator McCain, your colleague, I know you disagree with him on several issues. There are a lot of people in Washington say, you know, whether they're for or against the balanced budget amendment, Senator, I've lived here and worked here a long time. It's not going to happen this year.
Well, John, a lot of people are saying that because they don't want a balanced budget amendment to happen. The fact is that the only legislation that's made its way through one house of Congress is the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, which calls for a balanced budget amendment as a conditioned precedent for raising the debt limit. And as I explain in my book, The Freedom Agenda, there is no way we're going to get a hold of this problem. There's no way that we're not going to have to come back to this well every few months in perpetuity until we constitutionally restrict Congress's borrowing power. It's the only way to do it on a permanent basis.
But one of the questions is that, and again, there are those listening who would agree with you 100%, who are cheering you on right now. There are others saying, I don't want a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. I wouldn't touch the Constitution for something like that. But the reality in Washington is, sir, again, it's just, you know, maybe things will change, but I don't see it happening. The question is what next? And I want you to listen to Leader Reid here. And the reason I ask the question is it's an important policy consideration, but politically the Democrats are trying to have this narrative that, you know, these new Tea Party guys came to Washington and they're going to destroy America by leading us into default. Listen to Leader Reid.
Nobody believes that the Boehner problem is anything more than a big wet kiss to the right wing, and I mean the Tea Party. That's who I mean. It's too bad his caucus is being run by such a small number of people.
I know you don't like the Boehner plan, but to that narrative from the Democrats, what would you say?
Well, first of all, there are so many things about that statement that are offensive and patently false. I don't know where to begin. Again, the Democrats are against this plan. I don't quite understand what he means by this being a big wet kiss for the Tea Party movement of the Republican Party. That doesn't make any sense to me. What does make sense to me is the fact that the Cut, Cap, and Balance plan is the only legislation that's been introduced in Congress, the only legislation that's received significant debate and discussion, and certainly the only piece of legislation that's been passed by one house of Congress. And yet Harry Reid and the Democrats in the Senate refuse even to allow it to come up for debate and discussion. If they don't like elements of it, they should amend it, rather than going behind closed doors with 4 or 5 people in the room, with the press excluded, and excluding them from the debate and discussion that the American people deserve to have.
Take us inside some of the conversations in the Republican Party. You were just elected. You have a 6-year term. You don't have to go back before the voters for some time. As you know, some of your House colleagues and your friends who are either directly linked or closely affiliated with the Tea Party movement, they face more pressure because they're up next year. I want to read something. He's a friend of yours. I know he's a supporter of yours. Eric Erickson, one of our contributors, wrote on redstate.com today. We sent to Washington a group of men and women to repeal Obamacare and cut Washington spending. Now we're confronted with the fact that they want to pass off their obligations to another deficit commission, give Barack Obama a too clever by half pass at raising the debt ceiling, and claim they did all they could. But they haven't. How tough, raw, are the internal tensions in the Republican Party between what I'll call some of you, the new members, and what my language, the establishment?
There is no question, John, that this is an issue on which a lot of people disagree. There's no question also that every single member of Congress, in both houses, in both political parties, is concerned about this issue. We understand that there are profound and very daunting consequences we may face if we pass August 2nd without raising the debt limit. But there are some of us who think that we also ought to be concerned about the risk that will confront us if we raise it too cavalierly, too reflexively, as we've done in the past without putting in place permanent, binding structural spending reform mechanisms of the sort that we need in a balanced budget amendment. When you read the credit warnings issued by the credit reporting agencies like Standard & Poor and Moody's, they make clear that we do need a plan to get out of this, and it needs to be permanent, and it needs to be binding. So I think that we do face a very significant risk if we just raise the debt limit without putting these measures in place. So far, I haven't seen another plan that addresses this. So far, I haven't seen any other plan introduced in bill form that's made any progress in Congress that raises the debt limit at all, other than cut, cap, and balance.
And if there is a plan in the next, say, 72 hours or so that's on the floor, your leadership is saying the clock is ticking, Senator Lee, this is what we need to do, that does some of what you want but doesn't have that balanced budget amendment in it, A, would you just vote no? Is that a non-starter for you if it doesn't have the balanced budget amendment in it? And B, would you try to use in the Senate, it depends on how it came to the floor, but every now and then you can use procedural tricks to try to block things. Would you just vote no, or would you try to block it if you had that power, if it didn't have a balanced budget amendment?
Well, I would oppose it, and as I always say, in advance of the situation, and you alluded to this dynamic a minute ago, you can't identify in advance of the situation what procedural tools you might use, which procedural tools might be most effective or even available. And so I'll hold off on that part of it until we get there, but I would oppose it.
Senator Mike Lee, appreciate your insights tonight. We'll keep in touch the next few busy days ahead.